People showed up in big numbers in Austin, Texas today, cheering Texas Democrats as they return to the state amid a huge Texas fight that has huge national implications. Texas has been at the center of this extraordinary demand by President Trump that Republican-controlled states like Texas should draw new congressional districts in an effort to effectively guarantee Republican control of Congress for years to come. And it really is not just Texas. Vice President J.D. Vance flew to Indiana last week to put pressure on the Republican governor there to also rig the Indiana maps for the Republicans. Politico reports that the White House has been talking with Republicans in Missouri and New Hampshire and South Carolina and Florida to try to get those states to all rig their congressional maps as well. So that's one thing he's trying, demanding changes to congressional district maps to essentially make it structurally impossible for Democrats to control Congress again, using Republican-controlled states to do it. That's one thing he's trying. Here's a second thing he's trying. Trump also appears to be trying to sort of establish a pretext for nullifying or delaying or not paying attention to the results of the midterm elections everywhere next year. He's doing this by demanding a new census, saying the old census shouldn't count. Now, the census and elections might sound like different things, but the census is how we get congressional districts. And if Trump can effectively nullify the existing census by blaming the counting of immigrants or something, by doing so, he will lay the ground for claiming that all the existing congressional districts in this country, which all only exist because of that census, he's laying the groundwork for claiming that those congressional districts are all somehow bad and they can't be used, and therefore we can't have congressional elections using the congressional districts that we thought we have. So that's two. It's another thing that he's trying. Well, now there's a third. Trump has a new idea for bollocksing up the midterm elections. And it's an idea that he says he got from his best friend, the guy he once said he wanted to be his best friend. On Friday, President Trump held a summit in Alaska with Vladimir Putin. Immediately after that summit, Trump said Putin gave him some advice on how to conduct elections here in our country. Trump said Putin says that people shouldn't be allowed to vote by mail. He says he got that idea from Putin. And so today, Trump says that he will sign an executive order barring Americans nationwide from voting by mail and potentially banning voting machines as well. Now, I would caution you, again, as always, to watch what he actually does here and not just what he says he is going to do. But if Trump is essentially taking tactical advice from the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin about how to hold something that looks like an election but isn't actually an election, as an answer to the existential question for American democracy, this is a little bit on the nose, right? Here's how historian and journalist Garrett Graff summed up what's at stake. He wrote today, quote, "This is step one on how we lose free and fair elections. It's not that Trump will cancel the midterms. It's just that everyone has to vote in person, and urban downtowns will be filled with ICE checkpoints and intimidating National Guard troops to, quote, double check that only citizens vote." Will we retain the right to replace our leaders by election? Joining us now is Garrett Graff, journalist, historian, and author of the brand new book, The Devil Reached Toward the Sky, an oral history of the making and unleashing of the atomic bomb. Mr. Graff, thank you so much for being with us tonight. It's a real pleasure to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Let me ask, first of all, about the sort of premise that I just laid out there in my introduction. I feel like I'm seeing three different lanes, three different tactics by which Trump is trying to call into question the normalcy and to sort of change expectations around the 2026 midterms. Do you think that's fair? Do you disagree?
I absolutely agree. And I think that what you're doing is key to understanding this, which is I think too often we think of sort of Donald Trump being crazy over here, being crazy over here, and being crazy over here, and that they're not related to some sort of larger plan or effort. Whereas I think what we are seeing is this roadmap for how our country loses free and fair elections, which is I have never been one to believe that, Donald Trump's going to cancel the midterms or cancel the 2028 presidential race. Russia, as we know, has elections. Saddam Hussein was elected head of Iraq when he was dictator there. Instead, what I think we are watching is subtle and not so subtle efforts by Republicans across the country, including in the White House, to change who gets to vote, how they vote, and subtly shape the electorate for 2026 and 2028 such that Republicans can lock in an illegitimate minority rule.
That, of course, proceeds in parallel with Trump's years-long effort to try to normalize the questioning of otherwise normal election results. So if you are narrowing, as you say, the number of people who can vote and the means by which people can vote, and you have normalized this idea that election results are inherently suspect and shouldn't be trusted if they don't favor Trump and his causes, that stew gets pretty toxic pretty quickly, whether or not elections are canceled. I mean, you get, I guess the question is where you see the line being drawn as to whether or not elections still count as free and fair once you're playing in these sorts of categories.
Absolutely. And I think you also need to fast forward through some of the developments that we're seeing this year. The hiring of 10,000 new ICE officers represents a sort of super empowered professional thuggery in cities across the country where federal law enforcement has been a light, if any, presence. We have armed National Guard troops headed from red states into blue cities right now, just as they did in Los Angeles earlier this spring. You don't need to discourage all that many people voting in all that many places across the country to radically reshape national politics.
Journalist and historian Garrett Graff, I really appreciate your thinking on issues like these and your clarity in the way you bring history to bear on this stuff. Thanks for talking with me about it tonight. I appreciate it.
Anytime, Rachel.